Thanks for that warm introduction, Jason. You didn't have to go on and on, dude. Good afternoon, Big KC. We're feeling a little... I know that I'm the one between you and cocktails, and I'm sorry for that. Good afternoon, Big KC. It's a little better. All right, well, I'm Ryan Downs. I do need an introduction because none of you have any idea who I am, and that's totally fine. I'm Ryan Downs. I'm CEO of a company called Proxibid in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon with all of you. And we're going to talk a little bit about the ecosystem here in God's country, in the middle of the country, the flyover states, where I'm very proud to live and plan to stay the rest of my life. We're going to talk a little bit about that. My journey is a very conventional one, probably like many of you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. I started my first business when I was 8 years old. And I lived in western Nebraska. And the best way to tell you where I lived is you would drive to the middle of nowhere, and then you keep going about another hour. And that's where I grew up. So my first business was a cattle business where I raised and sold cattle. And that allowed me to buy my first car when I was 13 years old, after I had already been driving about 5 years at that point. And we drove to school when we were 14 there, and I was able to buy my first car. But I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be in business and make money and have fun. So that's what I did. I actually went to the University of Nebraska, it was I'm kind of an old guy compared to a lot of you out here. So this is back in the early 90s when I was graduating. And the economy was pretty lousy. And I really didn't know what I was going to do when I got out of school. So I had this friend that had always wanted to go to law school. And he talked about it all the time, And finally he basically dared me to go take the LSAT with him and see how I would do. So it's Friday afternoon. We had to have it registered by 4 o'clock. We race down to the office. I sign up, and I take the LSAT. I had no intention of going to law school at that point. I'd never given it one thought. Scores came back in a few weeks, and I didn't know what they meant because it's a weird scoring system. It meant nothing to me. So I called my friend, and I said, hey, I got these scores. What does this mean? He goes, you're going to Harvard, baby. And so that's what I did. I actually went to law school on a dare. And man, did that set me on quite a path. 130,000 loans later, I wasn't quite sure what choice I had made. So I went to Harvard Law School. I worked really, really hard in the law firm. I made partner in 6 years. I think to this day I still have the record for the most billable hours in a month on this big trial. It was very challenging work. I liked it for a while. But I remember sitting in a plane one afternoon, flying back from some place, I don't even know where, and I was with the senior partner in the firm who was a gifted trial lawyer, and he was in his mid-60s. And I looked over at him sitting there, and I thought, man, this just doesn't get any better than what it is right now. This is what I've chosen to do for the next 30 or 40 years. And to be honest with you, I just wasn't passionate about it. Way back to when I was 8 years old, I knew I wanted to build businesses. I knew I wanted to create something. And frankly, I felt like my gifts could be better used than fighting in court and representing big companies. So I quit. Now, the other side of the story is I quit without telling my wife. And you can see, there's a little footnote down there. We had just had twin baby girls, like about 5 months earlier. So that was a little tricky to bring that news home. Actually, my wife was wonderful. She's very supportive of what I did. And I knew I wanted to go into business, but I didn't think I could do it from where I was. So I just quit, and I made a hard pivot, a hard change in my life. I just flipped everything upside down. And I actually moved the family back to Omaha, where my wife was from. We were living in Denver at that time. And I figured where I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, at least I would be around a support network where I knew people and we had family there. So I moved back to Omaha. I next started a technology company without knowing anything about technology. So it just keeps getting better. You're like, why is this guy speaking to us? What does he possibly know? But one thing I did know is I could find people who did know about technology, and I had a vision for what we wanted to do, and this is back at a time when most businesses actually were not on the web. This is the late 90s. And if they were on the web, it was with horrible websites, you know, nothing dynamic. They were these business card sites, and they were dreadful. And we were kind of serving those middle-sized companies that knew they had to do better and were willing to invest in it, but they didn't have any talent in-house to do it. And we started taking companies onto the web, building e-commerce solutions and all kinds of cool stuff that, looking back, you know, it looks pretty dated now, everything we did, but it was a real exciting time and just full feet in. I had a mentor one time who told me we learn the most when we are in completely over our heads, Ryan, and he was right. And that was, my dad had another way of describing it. I actually didn't plan to tell you this, but it is pretty funny. He told me I got $1 million education jammed up my butt a nickel at a time. That's actually what he told me being an entrepreneur was. So I don't know why I told you that, but it just kind of popped into my head. My dad has a Western Nebraska flair, I'm sure you would all appreciate. But I started a technology company. I didn't know anything about technology, but I learned very quickly. One of the companies I did some work for was a company called PayPal. I had met Peter Thiel a few years earlier. Peter was also a frustrated lawyer. I'm sure most of you know at this point who Peter Thiel is. Brilliant entrepreneur, brilliant guy. And I'd known him for a few years, and he actually had a very small operation in Omaha, Nebraska, where I was living. And they had some pretty major technical problems and technical outages, so he heard that I was there. He called me, asked if I could help out. And so I sent over a couple of my best engineers, and we helped Peter out. Well, one thing led to another, and I got another call from Peter a few months later, and he told me he wanted me to join his team. So I remember the conversation vividly with Peter. He said I basically told him, look, I'm running a company, I'm having fun, I don't know anything about payments, I don't know anything about what you're doing. I mean, it's great to watch it, but yeah, I don't know if you're the right guy. And he told me 4 things. I'll never forget these 4 things. He said, first, Ryan, most importantly, I trust you. You will give me a straight story. I need someone out there helping me with all the operational stuff that I can trust. All right, fair enough. He said, you're a smart guy. You can learn payments and all the stuff we're doing. Okay, fair enough. He said, we're in so much trouble from a regulatory standpoint right now that your legal background might be the most important thing you bring. That's number 3. But to this day, it's number 4 that caused Peter to hire me. He goes, you're willing to live in Omaha, Nebraska. So there we are. I joined PayPal. Now, my timing, once again, was perfect because I just made that decision about 1 week after 9/11. So the world had kind of come to this grinding halt, and I thought, hey, twins are a little older now, you know. I just started this company. What a great time to try something else. Let's jump in. So I joined PayPal. An amazing ride at PayPal. I spent 8 years. I helped take that company through IPO, through the acquisition by eBay, and through the massive expansion around the world. I also did a lot of work on the eBay side as one of the senior executives, and at one point I was responsible for about 12,000 people in probably 30 countries around the world. And it was an amazing experience. I learned a ton. It was like having 50 years of business experience in 8. And it was really wonderful. And I did that for a long time, and then just reached a point where I'd kind of done what I wanted to do there, and I took some time off. And I stayed at home for a while. I traveled. I did some investing. I worked on some boards. And finally, my wife said, one day, she looked at me. She goes, don't you have somewhere to go? So I headed back out into the community. I got to find the next thing. And that's when I found Proxibid. So I have, I think, a real luxury now that maybe a lot of people don't have. I get a chance in my hometown to help build another big global internet marketplace, and that's very, very exciting. PayPal had started a few years before I joined. Today we actually are in the business of selling high-priced and specialized assets, and we work a lot with big auction companies around the world. And this year we'll sell between $2 and $3 billion worth of merchandise on our platform. And I love this team. I love what we're doing. And it's really awesome that I get a chance to try this again and do it right here in the Midwest. So that's kind of my journey. In all seriousness, I think the odds that I am standing here before you are, based on where I came from, are really quite low. I have, none of my family were all involved in farming or teaching. No exposure to technology. I grew up in a town of 500 people. And so I just feel very blessed to have come from that kind of background where most of my friends never even left that small community, and to be able to be here in front of you today reflecting on some, I think some extraordinary experiences that I've been fortunate to be part of. I think there are two reasons, really two things that brought me to this point. One is my parents, because my parents didn't care how fancy our background was. We had no money. We grew up quite poor. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't really think about it, but we didn't have any money. But the one thing we did have, we had a belief in our family. It was in our fabric that you could do anything you wanted to do, and I was given that impression from a very, very early age. So I didn't ever think about limits. Like, if I want to do it, I'm going to go try it and do it. And you can see with my conventional path that I tried some different things. The second thing, though, is actually being part of this ecosystem in the Midwest. Now, I happen to be kind of in more the Nebraska area, but I've spent a lot of time in Kansas City, a lot of time in Des Moines, and everywhere around this region. And the things that have helped me exist in all these communities. And I'm gonna reflect on those things a little bit with you guys, so you kind of get my perspective on what I think we have here and why it's valuable, but also some things that maybe we can do some work on. And because it is a bit of a community effort, and the work's kind of never done. But when you talk about ecosystem, it's pretty straightforward, really. It's really an economic community supported by a foundation of interacting organizations and individuals. It's an interdependent community. That's really what it is. You guys are part of that. This event is part of it. And that's really what we're talking about here. And there are a number of elements. Look, this is not scientific. There are other people that have a different point of view on this, but this is from my perspective what I think makes up a rich ecosystem where you can build great enterprises. Education, mentorship, infrastructure, talent, funding. And with every one of those, there's been some profound experiences in my journey that have been provided by this place we all call home. If you think about education, we really have a good system here. Primary education, secondary education, our university education. It's really very solid. I don't think a lot of people in the United States maybe give it the credence it deserves, But I've lived all over the United States. I've lived on the East Coast. I've lived on the West Coast. I've lived in the South. We have it pretty good here from an educational standpoint. I think many of you are probably products of public schools like me. I went to public schools. My kids go to public schools. That's not a luxury that you might have everywhere in the world, to have really high quality primary and secondary public school education. And what I found, I went to University of Nebraska, a state school, probably not ranked that high in any U.S. news report or whatever. And when I went out to Harvard, frankly, I was a little nervous. I thought maybe I would be in way over my head. Everybody that was there pretty much went to Harvard, Yale, Stanford. But I can tell you that my foundation of primary and secondary education and undergraduate right here in the middle of the country at kind of one of our standard universities really served me pretty well. I competed well. I was fine. I mean, after I got over the shock of having to get rid of my car I'd had for all those years, it was, I did fine. And anybody here can compete anywhere. I think that was a great lesson. I also lived on the West Coast. And when I showed up there, my colleagues that I worked with said, you don't want your kids in public school. I mean, there was no, hey, Ryan, here's a choice, here's an option. They all just said, you can't do that. And so they all used their connections, which was nice, and they introduced us to all these fancy private schools. And we went and interviewed. We had third second or third grade girls. I think our girls were third grade. They had to go be interviewed. I don't know what you're going to ask a kid. You know, do you eat your boogers? I don't know. I mean, what do you ask a kid at third grade to see if they're equipped to be in your school? But we did all that, and they got selected, and then we proceeded to pay $19,875 a year for each of our kids to go to school. Okay. We're there a couple years. We bring the kids back, where you get to go to school in my little community. That I live outside of Omaha in a kind of a rural community. I pay my taxes, my kids just go to school, and guess what? They showed up at that little public school, and they were actually behind. We had to kind of catch them up a little bit in a couple subjects, because despite paying $19,875 per kid per year, they were actually a little bit behind. And so we have that foundation here that I think a lot of us take for granted. And even if you do go to private school here, it tends to be more affordable. So education is a very important piece of our ecosystem, and I think we're doing a lot of things really well. If you talk about mentorship, you've heard a lot about this today. I don't think there was a person on stage today who did not reference some piece of wisdom from a mentor or some reliance on mentorship. And it is a huge thing for entrepreneurs. Often as an entrepreneur, or somebody starting into a new business area, you feel a little bit alone. You feel like you're on an island. You feel completely ill-equipped to do what you've been asked to do. And you don't even know what you don't know. And mentorship is essential. And I'm here to tell you guys, I've been all over the world. There is no place where high-quality mentors are more accessible than where you live right here. And you need to take advantage of that. You can call anybody. You can sit down with CEOs of any company, entrepreneurs, guys who invest, business leaders, government leaders. It does not matter. You can access them here, and you can do it easily. Take advantage of that. I have several times. When I started that technology company with no background in technology, the first thing I did is find 4 or 5 smart people to try to tell me what to watch out for, what to do. When I left PayPal and drove my wife crazy and she made me go back out and find something to do, I actually went on what I called a listening tour, and I scheduled 100 meetings with people in the region. A lot of people, I knew I would never do anything even close to what they were involved in, but I knew I'd learn about what was going on in different areas, and I knew I'd make connections. And it just so happens that my opportunity at Proxibid came from one of those meetings, but it was one of those meetings with a person I knew who introduced me to another person, who introduced me to another person. 5 connections later is how I found that opportunity. And you don't do that just sitting around waiting for things to happen. You have to take advantage of the amazing access you have to talent in this region. Here's a quote from Jordan Lampe from Douala. Growing up in Iowa, a supportive and engaging community is the norm. We share a common idea that happiness isn't earned through money, but to whom you are able to provide value that day. We'll happily go knee-deep in water to help neighbors bail out their cousin's flooded home. Life is hard, but a community that takes care of each other like Midwesterners are known to do makes life a bit easier. That kind of culture has had a profound effect on the way we look at problems, build solutions, and grow companies. He's exactly right. This is a friendly, helpful place. Take advantage of it as an entrepreneur. I know I have.
Go, Jordan.
Some Douala guys here, I know. All right, we talk about infrastructure. It's a pretty broad category. I think about this as kind of that support network that kind of holds everything together and makes it possible to have successful enterprises. And again, having worked all over the world, we have it really good in this part of the world. I mean, there are all kinds of pieces that make this up. Accelerators, chambers of commerce, government entities, just the affordability and quality of real estate and internet connectivity and power and all those things that you need in a community to actually have a thriving ecosystem. We actually have most of those in a real solid way here. I think there are now 12 accelerators in Kansas City alone. My company actually came out of an incubator in Omaha, the Scott Technology Center. And I don't know if we'd exist today if that opportunity wasn't available. I have to call out Silicon Prairie News, though. These guys are extraordinary. I'm so excited that for their inaugural event here in Kansas City, there's been such a great turnout. Jeff and his team, let's give them a hand. They are an extraordinary piece of this community. They really are. And I don't know, where is Jeff? He's here somewhere. I tell you, so here's what Jeff and his team really do. They celebrate successes. That is one of the secret sauces of a great ecosystem. Because if you don't celebrate them, nobody knows. Nobody knows there's a community. Nobody gets that feeling, well, I can do it if they did it. These guys are celebrating every day. They're pulling people together. They're fueling the community. And I just think they do an extraordinary job. Now here's another quote from a guy named Paul Jarrett of Bulu Box. There's more of a want for businesses here, so it feels like everyone goes out of their way. The vibe I got from the East and West Coast is that it was more competitive. So essentially the added value items here in the Midwest have been fantastic. You know, essentially, I've always had this feeling too, that whether it's government leaders or civic leaders or business leaders, even strangely enough, some businesses you might even compete with a little bit, they actually want you in their community. They actually, you know, if you don't live here, they try to recruit you here. If you do live here, they try to knock down barriers and make connections so you can thrive. I just find that extraordinary. I just haven't felt that kind of underlying community support anywhere else I've been. Doesn't mean that other places don't have it. I'm just telling you, it is richer here than maybe some of you realize. Talent. Now, this is incredibly key. You know, in most of our companies, which tend to be virtual, tend to be technology oriented, we don't really have much else, guys. And we've got some code, we've got some servers. Really what we have is people. That's our main asset. Skills really do matter. You need certain skills, you need certain aptitude, you need, in some instances, certain experience. But I will tell you what I value more and what I have found to a huge degree here in the middle of the country. And that is character of employees, character of team members. I've never been around people who have more integrity, who work harder, and are more loyal than the people here. I mean loyal. People here do not jump around. They will dig in through thick and thin, through the hard times. They will stick with you. They will make things happen for you. It is inspiring to see. When I worked in Silicon Valley, I remember one time I was in charge of a project that had a dozen people from kind of different departments all over the company. Every single one of them had been at least 3 startups. And they stayed like 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, until something maybe a little better popped up. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has their freedom to do that. That's very rare where we live. Not that you don't have serial entrepreneurs that do it again, but they're rarely doing it every 6 months. They usually really commit to something. I think that's a very special aspect of our workforce. I want to talk a little bit about an employee who's on my team, so you can understand how I think about talent and loyalty and character in employees. And he's probably watching this stream, and this is going to embarrass him in front of 122 of his colleagues, which I rather enjoy, actually. But the guy I'm going to talk about is a guy named Pat Wynn. Pat Wynn is probably 30 years old or so. Proxibid's been his only job. He came out of the University of Nebraska. He went to Proxibid. This guy is extraordinary. When I show up at work at 8-ish, nobody laugh on the Proxibid team, 8-ish, Pat's already been working for 2 or 3 hours. Oftentimes he logs in at home and does a whole bunch of work. There was a time when a customer who had left us was having a problem in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., Pat noticed. He was watching his live auction event. Pat noticed, called the guy, helped him. It wasn't even our client. He just cared enough to call this. He became our client after that. Pat he's the most selfless, thoughtful human being I've ever worked with. And you know what? I've worked with hundreds of people kind of like Pat. Not quite like Pat, because he's special. But there's a lot of people like that here. I don't think Pat would ever leave Proxibid. He will do anything. And you know what he has the nerve to do after he does all this work? He comes to me and thanks me for giving him the opportunity. Plus, he tells me I pay him too much. I mean, where else in the world are you going to find people like that? And I've had a lot of them over the years. And that is why I do what I do. To be around people like that, to create something together, to maybe inspire them sometimes, but more than anything, to be inspired by them. So think about Pat Wynn when you're thinking about the resource we have here in the middle of the country. You can stop being embarrassed now, Pat. Here's a quote from a guy named Toby from iVerify, which I assume a lot of you know about iVerify. There's an inherent goodness here that you just don't find anywhere else. We are the most ethical, moral, decent, and genuine people, and we operate at a higher level of trust, work ethic, integrity. I've never seen it in any other region. This is not something you train. It's not taught in school. We have it built into our DNA. And I do believe that. I do believe that there's a certain set of values that you acquire as a young person. And we just have something special here. And I think we can build great companies forever here with talent like that. All right, the last piece, I guess I've got a couple more points here, but just looking at the time, I'm going to move on. The last piece I want to touch on is funding. Funding, I think, is the most difficult piece to solve in our ecosystem. We do have a few VCs around here. We do have some organizations that can connect you to money, that can put you into a network of people who have money. But it's not easy here. Most of the VC activity here kind of sits in that, 500,000 to maybe 2 million zone, which is great. You can get started with that. And here where we live, because it's rather affordable, you can actually do quite a bit with that money, where it'd be harder on the coast to do a lot. But if you need more money, that's where it gets a little tricky. My company just went through a funding round. We were successful in that round. We initially started out, and we needed more money than what I'm talking about, a multiple of what I mentioned. And so we started hitting both coasts. And we spent a lot of time in Boston, a lot of time in Silicon Valley. Had no trouble getting meetings, had no trouble telling our story, and we had several people interested. But it was frustrating because it was very hard for them to wrap their heads around somebody being in Omaha. When they had 400 companies a week from the Silicon Valley coming in their door with very interesting ideas. And there's actually an interesting Harvard study about where VCs spend their money. And what you find is they actually don't go far away from home very often. When they do, they actually raise the bar. They raise the requirements that the company must meet in order to do so. Typically, you have to have stronger cash flow or financial position. You have to have something so unique that you don't have it anywhere else. But in the end, a lot of it comes down to they don't really want to travel or feel like they have to travel to go find good opportunities. Because they have that higher bar for companies in this part of the world, the success rate is actually quite a bit higher for coastal VCs who spend money out here. Once they spend money out here, they tend to do it again. And so that's again where the success stories are so valuable for this ecosystem. Because you get 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 companies that have used major VC capital from the coast and had success, the likelihood of getting others to come or getting that firm to invest, again, goes way up. So this was a rather challenging process. We had one group in Boston say, we love it, we want to do it, but we don't invest west of Ohio. I don't know why Ohio. Maybe direct flight? I don't know. I thought these guys had jets, but they wouldn't go west of Ohio, and so the thing just died. And it was very frustrating. Anyway, we're navigating that process. We probably talked to 50 or 60 VCs. no problem getting meetings. We had a good story to tell. But we weren't liking the feel of it. So we started working a parallel process, and we did it locally. And like I said, there aren't a lot of funds that have that kind of capacity. So we started working our network and getting to high wealth individuals. And you got to be creative to do that. You got to hustle. You got to make connections. But again, we have enough accessibility here to people. I mean, if you don't know the wealthiest people yourself, somebody in your network does, and you just got to work that. And you got to get in front of the people, and you got to tell the story. And I found that it's most effective to hook them on. I mean, they all live here. They've built something here. You hook them on that element. You know, help us build here. Build something here. We can all relocate to the coast and do something there. Help us do it here. And that really resonated. And we met with several of these guys, and we actually had one individual take our full round, which was really tremendous, and we're off and running, and we're very excited about that. So it's a little harder work. We can't play the Silicon Valley game. We have to play our own game, and sometimes, you know, that's a little harder. But that's, you know, every ecosystem has its strengths and weaknesses. This is probably the one we need to focus the most on. Now, VCs, I met with a couple guys last night who are in this space in Kansas City, and they tell me they're starting to see younger entrepreneurs. So it looks like, I mean, it feels like we're actually keeping people in this community. I get this feeling that Kansas City is just on a bit of a wave right now, like a really strong underlying entrepreneurial community. And they're seeing it too, which is great. But we still don't have, you know, quite the capital we need to handle all those. So there's some work to do. In the end, this is what people are saying. We have to play our own game here. We have our own ecosystem. We can try to duplicate Silicon Valley. It is not going to happen. And you've got a couple opinions here. You know, we shouldn't try to be Silicon Valley, New York, or Boston. It's not to create a replica, but to leverage our own unique differentiators. I've talked about some of those. The other gentleman, Mike Peck, said we have to play our own game. We have to focus on clusters of business that work here, that make sense here. That's why I know Kansas has funded the huge biotech area, because that works here. Agribusiness stuff is very strong. The technology and web stuff is strong. We're probably not going to do you know, genetic engineering type businesses, you know, the real hardcore, you know, genetic companies here, things like that. Probably not going to do major oil company stuff right here as much. But we can focus on some clusters where we can have success, and we can leverage our strengths and our differentiators as a community. So, are we there yet? Well, no. I mean, an ecosystem is a living organism. And like I said, they all have strengths and weaknesses. If I were going to focus on three things that we need to do as a community, it would be, number one, the funding thing. We do have to figure out how to aggregate more dollars that are aimed at high-risk ventures. Number two, we do need to enhance the talent pool. We do not have enough developers here. We do not have enough graphic design people here. We don't produce enough in the universities. A lot of our talent has left over the years. We've got to get them back, and we've got to work in the education system to get people more interested in technology earlier in life. I mean, pre-university. And who's going to do it other than the community? We have to produce more technical people here. And the third thing is, as I mentioned, we need to celebrate our successes. When something works, we need to yell it from the tops of the buildings so everybody hears. That's why Silicon Prairie is so important. That's why these other organizations are so important that help celebrate these things. The cool thing is that we have a community who can actually address these things. These are solvable. I was thinking last night about what is it that motivates entrepreneurs? Is it getting rich? Is it having a fancy car? No, I don't think so. I mean, that's a nice, maybe, side effect of success. But that's really not the driving, that's not at the core of it. That's not the essence of it. The essence of it, in my estimation, is making an impact. That's why everybody's here, making an impact. And we have a chance here to keep making an impact and build this ecosystem. We are not perfect yet as an ecosystem, but we're a lot better off than a lot of other places, and we have a lot of assets that other places don't have. And think back 10 years ago, for any of you who are involved, or even 5 years ago, and look where Kansas City, Des Moines, Omaha are today in the tech communities compared to where they were. That's because of people like you who decided to make an impact, who come together at events like this and share and support one another, who mentor each other, who invest in each other's companies. That is why the thing has improved so much, and that's the only way it will continue to improve. So think about that. Make an impact. That's why I do what I do, so I can make an impact on people's lives, the people who work for me, the customers who use my products. I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference. I want to look back in 20 years and have created something of significance. That's why I'm not a trial lawyer anymore, because it was not impactful enough for me. So make a difference. Do it. Make an impact. And there's so many companies here. I heard somebody talking today to 93 startups or something in this region, right here in Kansas City alone. There's no way I could list all those, but I captured a few who are making an impact in our community, and they inspire me. So I thank you for your time. It's great to be here and talk with you today. I probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I don't know if we have any or not, but yes, sir.
I appreciate your story, and I'm a little bit older, and I want to play back what I heard, and then I want to spot a challenge to you.
Okay.
I think what I heard you describe is that when we think about the Kansas City regional watershed, our balance sheet is in really pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think it is.
My only problem is I think that's true for maybe the upper 2/3, but on the lower third, the story about education is definitely in need of some serious effort. And when Google first came to Kansas City, and we had a lot of energy around what to do with it, one of the questions that got raised was, well, what happens if all this energy ends up widening the gap between those who are underserved and those who have the advantages that we have? And so I just want to hear a little bit maybe about how do we pick up that other half?
Well, it's a hard problem. It's a problem that's existed for a long time. Personally, I've seen a lot of nonprofits and a lot of committees and a lot of state organizations go after these problems. But in the end, there's probably no substitute for just people like us getting involved on the ground. So I recently got involved in a project in North Omaha, which suffers from a few of the issues that you mentioned, sir, and I assume in Kansas City, Missouri, or other areas you're talking about. And North Star takes young boys and provides them a supplemental program in addition to school, and a lot of it's going to be oriented around using computers and creative stuff and working together. And so not only am I going to be on the board there, but I'm going to be, we're building it out now, but we're actually going to be hands-on with these young boys trying to impact their lives. And you may say, well, that's a hard way to do it, a kid at a time, but that's quite honestly how you have to do these things. And so you can try to rely on these committees and these grand plans and throwing money at it, but in the end, I think it's the time of people who care enough to make an impact on a single person or a handful of people, because only then can they impact others, and you sort of have to change this a person at a time. So I don't know if it answers your question fully, but that's personally what I do, is I actually try to get involved in at that one-to-one level. And imagine if we all did that, how many people we could influence in a year. And girls, yes. My program happened to be young boys, but you're exactly right, the young girls as well. So, especially young girls in technology. I mean, man, what an opportunity. Get them on the computers, They'll knock it out. What else? Anything else? No? Oh, we have, no? Okay.
Right.
Well, thanks for spending time with me today, guys.
Thank you, Ryan. That was awesome. Thank you. You were better than my